I'm Chris with Tactical Aviation. The FAA is bringing you some new nighttime regulations starting in March. The updated knowledge test is going to assess your knowledge of risks and situations that are not present during daylight operations. This new rule allows for routine operations of small UAS at night under two conditions. First, the remote pilot in command must complete a current initial knowledge test or recurrent training, as applicable, to ensure familiarity with the risks and appropriate mitigations for nighttime operations. Second, the small unmanned aircraft must have lighted anti-collision lighting visible for at least 3 statute miles that has a flash rate sufficient to avoid a collision. The remote pilot must ensure the anti-collision lights are operating and visible for 3 statute miles and have a flash rate sufficient to avoid a collision at the operating location. The FAA clarified that such anti-collision lights are any flashing or stroboscopic device that is sufficient intensity so as to be visible for at least 3 statute miles. The new rule does not provide a requirement for position lighting. The purpose of anti-collision lighting is not for the remote pilot to maintain visual line of sight and see the orientation of the small unmanned aircraft, but for the awareness of other pilots operating in the same airspace. The requirements for anti-collision lighting will ensure the small unmanned aircraft is sufficiently visible to other aircraft. Part 107 already requires the anti-collision lighting be visible for 3 statute miles for civil twilight operations to help prevent mid-air collisions. The remote pilot may rely on the manufacturer's statement indicating the anti-collision light is visible for 3 statute miles and has a flash rate sufficient to comply with the requirements of Part 107. However, the remote pilot ultimately remains responsible for verifying that anti-collision lighting is operational, visible for 3 statute miles, and has a flash rate sufficient to avoid collision. The remote pilot in command may reduce the intensity of, but may not extinguish the anti-collision lighting if they determine that, because of operating conditions, it would be in the interest of safety to do so. The anti-collision light also does not relieve the remote pilot from complying with the remaining requirements of Part 107, which include yielding the right-of-way to all other aircraft. The initial aeronautical knowledge test will have the updated knowledge area on night operations and will be available on March 1, 2021 at knowledge testing centers. On March 16, 2021, you are permitted to conduct operations at night, provided you have successfully completed the updated initial aeronautical knowledge test or recurrent training. 60 days after the effective date of the rule, no person may operate a small UAS at night in accordance with the certificate of waiver issued prior to the effective date of the rule. Existing waivers from 107.29 granted prior to March 16th will terminate 60 days after the effective date of the rule. The certificates of waiver issued prior to March 16th under Part 107 that authorize deviation from night operations terminate on May 17th, 2021. Remote pilots conducting operations in accordance with a current night waiver will need to complete the updated night operations knowledge area, either by retaking the initial aeronautical knowledge test or completing the recurrent online training within 60 days of the effective date of this rule. And all prior waivers expire on May 17th, 2021. Thank you, and I'll see you next lesson.